I'm alive. I shouldn't be.
He should not be alive. This is unfucking believable.
From the heart of trucker America, my boy Reed Coverdale, host of The Naturalist Capitalist.
This is what government does. It sucks.
If you think you're going to win people over by stating commonplaces, you're just selling the other part.
It is about dictating every transaction that you have for the rest of your life.
Mr. Potato Head.
Coverdale is the guy to be president of the United States.
You intimidated me with your perfect 74 stat.
That was the beginning of my problems.
He died doing what he loved, chasing a minor.
But I'll put a 50 cal attached to my Suburban.
Libertarians need to get out of New York.
The gulag is going to be in your house.
This guy's a fucking murderer. He deserves to be in a dungeon.
Gotta get him out of that truck at night and get him into the White House.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Naturalist Capitalist. If you're watching this live on YouTube, I know I'm a little late, but Tulsi Gabbard actually started doing a live stream on Locals, so I was trying to get her attention again. And like I said in the video I did with Dave, if you guys want her to get on my show, just go harass her for me. She's already agreed to do it, but it's been over a year since she said she would, and I don't really know what to do other than being autistically annoying until she finally does it. So if you guys follow her on Locals, or if you want to go to Twitter or whatever, just tag her, harass her, get her attention. Anyways, if you're watching this live on YouTube, you can also watch it on Odyssey within a couple days if you'd prefer to not support big tech platforms. And you can also listen to this on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and then you can follow me on all the links in the description. Tonight, we've got an interesting show. This is the crossover a lot of you guys have probably been waiting for. We've got both of the Reed C's in the Liberty movement on the same show together. He is Reed Cooley. How you doing tonight, man?
Man, after seeing your intro, I actually feel a little bit more pumped, dude. You have got an absolutely kick-ass intro for your show. It's one of the best I've ever seen. The line there, Reed Coverdale, that's the guy for president. That's awesome, man. So I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing good, yeah, and thanks, man. Appreciate that. I finally paid to have a professional intro after I hit around 200 episodes. But yeah, your similarities with me don't end at your name. You also had really bad internet connection last time, which is something I'm known for, but we worked it out. So tell us a little bit about yourself. You're kind of the Indiana Jones of the Liberty movement. You're the archaeologist. You're not kicking Nazis and opening the Ark of the Covenant or anything like that, but you've done a lot of cool stuff in the past. So just give a little bit of history as to who Reed Cooley is.
Well, I mean, unlike Indiana Jones, I prefer kicking communists over kicking Nazis any day. But I like that. I mean, it's not the first time I've had that comparison, but to your point, I'm a former archaeologist turned into libertarian political operative. I think that's probably a good way of putting it. So my journey with liberty began whenever I was an undergraduate student at Baylor University. I was a double major in history and anthropology, studying to become an archaeologist, which was my first career, you might say. As an archaeologist, I worked on several different projects, really around the world. My first archaeological project was in Italy, in a place called Barberano Romano, which is about 37 miles northwest of Rome. I worked there during 2016. After that, I worked on two other excavations here in the state of Texas. The first one was in a place called McGregor, Texas. It was a Native American site where we excavated thousands and thousands and thousands of different lithic points, what people commonly call arrowheads. That was done the following year, so 2017. This was the year after my big project in Italy. Right after that, I worked on a Spanish mission from the late 18th century. That was an incredibly unique site in the sense that so this site dated from 1762 to 1771. It was a Spanish mission in Southwest Texas. And at that time, the Spanish Empire was really a global empire. I mean, it was an empire upon which the sun never really set. So they had access to all sorts of goods from all around the world. And it was at a single site in Southwest Texas, actually in a place called Uvalde. That's right about the part of the world where Matthew McConaughey was born, of all things. in a single site. We were excavating Native American remains, as well as like Spanish pottery, French pottery, British pottery and ceramics, and Chinese ceramics. So you're talking about just all this stuff from all different parts of the world being excavated in one place. And then after that, I worked on a research project. So no excavations were involved or anything, but more of a research project where I helped edit some research that was done into the origin of the Native Americans. So, there's I wouldn't say that the debate is as vigorous as it used to be. Obviously, it's pretty widely accepted among the scientific community that, the Native Americans, their ancestry lies in Central Asia, what is today Siberia, Mongolia. This can be verified, through DNA, mitochondrial DNA analyses and stuff like that, as well as just, general archaeological records going all the way through Eastern Russia and into the Americas. It's fairly common. Then you got a few quacks who like to go against the grain with just these, horribly substantiated alternate theories, I guess. But I helped understand a little bit about. I helped edit some research that was designed to help the public understand a little bit more about some of the archaeological findings in northeast Russia around what you call the Yenisei and the Ob rivers, so just north of the Kamchatka Peninsula. Did that for a little bit. Then after a pretty good stint in archaeology, several years in it, I just decided that archaeology was a phenomenal passion, but it just wasn't fulfilling every single need that I had. Whether financially or mentally or whatever else, right? So I decided I wanted to make a bigger difference in the world than digging up dead people and their garbage. So I decided to go into politics and dig up garbage on my political enemies. You might say, in that sense, there's a little bit of overlap between archaeology and politics, but not much else.
You don't need to use a toothbrush digging up political dirt on your enemies, though. It's a little easier, not quite as delicate, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that's probably pretty accurate. But just after archaeology, I decided I wanted to get into politics. Turns out a few years before that, my political views had been completely turned upside down by this guy named Ron Paul. I'm not sure, maybe you've heard of him, but I was a young college Democrat whenever I was first getting involved in politics, like as a college student. I don't know, 2012, 2013. Probably began as sort of I was never extraordinarily progressive. I was never very far of a leftist or anything like that. Whenever you're from Mississippi, it's a lot harder to be any kind of a leftist or anything like that.
Sure.
I was probably like a center left, like socially conservative, Blue Dog Democrat as a young person. I started meeting more libertarians. I started meeting folks with libertarian ideas, even some anarchists. Became friends with them, started actually just meeting with them, debating the ideas over a lunch or after class or whatever it was. And I'll just say there wasn't really like one great eureka moment whenever I said, oh my gosh, I must be a libertarian. It wasn't really like that. It was probably very, very gradual. And I just decided, that the values that I really had all along were much more in sync with libertarianism, right? So that's whenever I came across the Giuliani moment. I was probably sophomore, junior in college. I came across a lot of Ron Paul's other writings. The Yale chapter at Baylor University, they gave me one of those pocket constitutions, a copy of End the Fed by Ron Paul. It was about that time I got into Tom Woods as well, started paying a lot of attention to him on Facebook and Twitter. And just like I said, over time, just sort of went from like center left, Blue Dog Democrat, I guess, to the libertarian, that you're talking to today. So that's kind of my journey to liberty. It all began with Ron Paul.
Yeah. So I found a lot of empirical influence from my work and my life that pushed me toward libertarianism. I know you said Ron Paul was kind of the origin of you thinking that way, but did any of the archaeological work influence your libertarianism at all? Even in hindsight, did any of that kind of make sense? Because for me, it did from what I do for work.
That's an interesting question. There was something really interesting that I don't know that it necessarily helped me become a libertarian. I was probably a libertarian by the time I found this particular anthropologist's work. But there was an anthropologist from I believe it was UCLA, named Philippe Bourgeois. And Dr. Bourgeois, he actually studied youth in East Harlem back in the early 2000s, and he wanted to understand why it was exactly that so many youth in East Harlem were engaging in gang activity, right? Like why were they basically engaging in the kind of lifestyles that they were? And without going into all of the arguments, that Dr. Bourgeois was making, he started talking. He did discuss extensively the way that everyday people in East Harlem, they're in the streets, sort of viewed the police, right? And how they viewed the gangs, and really just, the police really were to these people in East Harlem just like the biggest bad of all of the gangs, right? Like the police, they were the ultimate gang roaming the neighborhood. They had the authority to levy taxes against these people, to stop and frisk these people at one point in history, to do all sorts of other, to throw them in a cage, to kill them if necessary, whatever else, right? So it was that was really interesting. It was 2017 by the time I found his ethnography, which was really just the synopsis of his work submitted to the academic community. And I read that, and I just felt like I don't think Dr. Bourgeois is a libertarian. Maybe I'm wrong, but I didn't get the feeling that this guy was a libertarian. This was someone from the depths of academia saying something awfully similar as a result of years of research into this group of people to something that I might have expected to hear from Murray Rothbard, right? So that was very interesting to me. That was you might say a little bit of a eureka moment there. There's another famous figure in the field of anthropology named Marvin Harris. Marvin Harris, if you talk to any self-respecting anthropologist, they'll be able to talk to you about Marvin Harris. They'll certainly recognize his name. If they're a good anthropologist, they'll be able to point to some of his work. And if they're a great anthropologist, they'll be able to explain to you some of his work, even if they have, but that's no guarantee that they're going to have a very positive opinion on it. But one of Marvin Harris's research foci was trying to understand exactly what happened to the manufacturing industry in the United States of the 20th century, and trying to understand the cultural and perhaps even sociological effects that the loss of American manufacturing was having on, let's say, the family unit. What kind of effect that was having on what kind of effect that was having on basically just, the societal fabric overall, right? Mm-hmm. Marvin Harris is generally considered to be a more conservative leaning anthropologist. I would say I probably agree with that assessment, minus a few things that I've read about him. Marvin Harris speculated that such a thing existed as a culture of poverty, wherein this was he was essentially making observations about people living in Detroit, for example, about how there are certain communities, or there are certain, maybe even individuals, maybe it does go down to the individual level, people who are actually scared of the idea of economic success, because like moving up the economic ladder, getting more money, taking on more responsibility, this is a very alien thing to them. This is something that's kind of scary. Like if being surrounded by poverty, right, is the only thing that they've ever really known, if it's sort of generational to them, then not everyone is necessarily going to seek to climb the economic ladder because of some of the consequences that happen as a result of that. So I read that. That was after I had graduated. I found Dr. Harris's work on the culture of poverty, and I thought that was fascinating, right? To see an anthropologist who probably doesn't have as much sympathy to the left, to Marxism as most other anthropologists you'll find. And he's saying, look, there's a strong case to be made based on this evidence that maybe not everybody necessarily aspires to climb the economic ladder. Maybe there are some people who are more comfortable with a state of poverty, or maybe just being in the middle class or below the middle class or whatever else, right? So that was pretty interesting. As far as your question, Reed, I would say Dr. Bourgeois and Dr. Harris, those were two cases where that I can immediately think of where, things that I was reading in anthropology and trying to internalize, it did, sort of serve in a complementary fashion towards my politics.
Yeah, so I know we want to talk about Young Americans for Liberty and some of the recent developments there, but you got heavily involved with Young Americans for Liberty after seeing the light on libertarianism. So what was that like? What did you what did you get? What did you get involved with as far as what type of position you had, and then what were the transformations you started to see happening over time?
Sure. So, I got more involved in Young Americans for Liberty, like I said, as an undergraduate student with my YAL chapter at Baylor, just because I was really frustrated with what I saw happening in academia. So when I was an anthropology student, my ambition was to go into academia. I wanted to go to graduate school or earn my PhD from a respectable school, become a professor, so on and so forth. But the more graduate programs that I studied, that I sort of reviewed and considered applying to, I was finding that, there's, 5 to 7 years worth of Marxist indoctrination that you're forced to go through before you can have doctor next to your name and before you can even stand a chance at the sort of job that I wanted. So a big part of the reason why, and this is probably unlike most other libertarians, but a big part of the reason why I got involved in Young Americans for Liberty specifically was because I wanted to help fight this problem in academia. What I saw was a mass Marxist infiltration of academia specifically, because when it comes to the dangerous and destructive ideas that are just plaguing our society today, they begin in academia. It's from academia, they trickle down from academia into the K through 12 schools, into policy, into the media, into every other institution across society that's been taken over one after another. The horrible leftist Marxist theories, they are cultivated inside of the halls of academia. And so Young Americans for Liberty, just given the fact that it had so many campus chapters and so much of its work was committed to fighting on college campuses specifically, that's why I decided to get involved with them. But it was because I wanted to help fight something that was ruining an industry that I had once wanted to go into. So I started off, I guess you could put it at the bottom of Young Americans for Liberty, really at the bottom of the hierarchy, if there is a bottom, so to speak, as a door-to-door grassroots canvasser. I joined a program called Operation Win at the Door, which is just kind of where you start if really you want to make any money and you're no longer a college student. Just going from campaign to campaign, state to state, knocking doors for candidates who are supposed to embody the ideas of liberty, right? I think most people probably understand the general gist of Operation Win at the Door. Maybe they've heard of it over the last few years. The program's been around for about 4 years now. But the idea is that Young Americans for Liberty, they want to have influence in the state legislatures, and they want to craft and sponsor model pro-liberty legislation. So they endorse candidates who support the ideas of liberty, basically, mini Ron Pauls, who are running for state legislature. They endorse them and they send people like I was back in 2018 to go knock doors for those candidates in those targeted, state legislative districts. I'll tell you, that was one of the best chapters of my life. 2018 on the campaign trail, I got to knock doors for some really great candidates, in and around Young Americans, the Young Americans for Liberty sphere, in Tennessee, Kentucky, Virginia, South Carolina, Missouri, Nebraska, Florida, handful of other states I got to be involved in as well. I would say, back then, the program was fundamentally different than what's happened today. And that's something that we can get into a little bit later. So that's kind of how I got involved. I began, like I said, just kind of at the bottom as a door knocker. Like I said, if there is a bottom of the Young Americans for Liberty hierarchy. And then over time, after 7 campaigns in late 2018, I was invited to work in a full-time capacity at the Young Americans for Liberty National Headquarters in a communications capacity. So at that time, there were only 2 communication staffers at Yale. There was the director of comms and the digital media director. About the time that I was invited to come on board, the director of comms went to go work for another company. So communications was really just 2 staffers. There was no real idea at that time, we're talking about late 2018, of really taking communications and weaponizing the potential of public relations and marketing and advertising and comms and all of that as a main driving engine for the company's growth. Right, there was no such idea that had ever been introduced to the company. So I was invited to go work in an entry level communications capacity. And I took them up on that. So I began working in comms in late 2018. From there, I pitched the idea of a distinct communications department. So Young Americans for Liberty had a development department, or that's fundraising. They had a grassroots department and a campus department. But I mean, I didn't just build the communications department at Yale over many years. I actually presented the idea to the company leadership at the time and said, here is what communications can provide this company, what branding can provide this company if we start taking these concepts seriously and we start bringing key people on board. So from 2018 until earlier this year, I got 2 more promotions at Young Americans for Liberty. First to Director of Public Relations, and then to Vice President of Communications at Yale. I was Yale's first ever Vice President of Communications. Throughout that time, I very slowly assembled the pieces for what would become Young Americans for Liberty's communications and marketing apparatus. So everything that people see today at Young Americans for Liberty, as far as social media, as far as marketing, all the social media platforms, as well as how the company engages earned media like TV, radio, podcasts, op-eds, press releases, all of that was under my purview. And all of that is a result of systems that I introduced to the company over a very long 3.5, almost 4 years, really. So what people see today as far as social media, digital ads, TV, radio, podcast, all of that is at the very least a remnant of what I built up with some other great people who I had brought on board over a period of 3.5, 4 years.
So what has changed recently? What started happening within the organization that you noticed and were not a fan of?
Well, as far as what I'm not a fan of, I could probably stay here for days with you and talk Reed. So in my capacity as Vice President of Communications, I mean, I was obviously overseeing all of the external content that was going out. I was overseeing the visual branding, pretty much everything but the website. The website had stayed under another executive's purview, and that was fine, in my opinion. I was basically responsible for being a guardian of the brand, right? Making sure that the organization had stayed on track towards the Ron Paul revolution, right? That was really sort of an unspoken, responsibility of mine. Was making sure that the original values of the organization were represented, that the organization wasn't being carried too far into some other ideology, that maybe somebody else in leadership wanted to carry it into. So that was where things began to get interesting with the leadership change that happened last year. So January of 2021, we had a CEO who was let go because of some allegations, against him involving some employees at the company. A few months later, to replace him, Yale hired a lady named Lauren Doherty to come in and fill his place as CEO. Things began to get problematic because the moment that Lauren Doherty was brought in, I believe technically it was March 2021, the moment that Yale hired her to serve as CEO, it was abundantly clear that she had every intention of taking the organization's brand from the Ron Paul revolution into some hideous admixture of wokeism and neoconservatism. That is to say, something like the direction of the Libertarian Party under the leadership of Nick Sarwark, or the influence of a Bill Weld type of person. Mm-hmm. So this was immediately clear. So over the next 10 months, I was basically just having to try and protect the Young Americans for Liberty brand from Miss Doherty's constant incursions, her constant attempts to take it and turn it into this hideous new direction. Those 10 months of creative differences culminated in the events of early February of 2022, whenever the board of directors contacted me and told me that they had chosen to terminate me over nothing more than my creative differences with Miss Doherty. They offered me a substantial financial settlement to basically sign an NDA waive all of my complaints against Ms. Doherty and the rest of the organization's leadership. And just based on principle, I guess, I turned it down. I said, there's no way I'm going to sign. My soul's not for sale. You can kiss my ass if you think that you're going to turn students for Ron Paul into students for Joe Bishop Hinchman, and I'm not going to say a damn thing about it, especially as I have put years, and other great people have put years of their lives into this organization, and some middle-aged, woke lady from the suburbs wants to come in and try and change it into something else. So I turned down the financial settlement, and I began sharing with the help of some other great people who were, and I kind of noticed what had been happening to y'all over the last several months. I began sharing with the outside world, what kinds of things Lauren Doherty had asked my team to do, what kinds of things that she had prevented my team from doing over the previous 10 months. And it didn't constitute a very pretty picture. To start summarizing, maybe just kind of an overview here. The first bit was, actually, this was a couple of weeks before she took position of CEO. All of the YAL staff had a meet and greet with Lauren, just to try to get to know her, whatever else, right? And one staffer asked her in front of all the YAL staff there at the YAL HQ in Austin, Texas, what are your thoughts on the Federal Reserve? Now, any self-respecting soon-to-be CEO of Students for Ron Paul should know what the answer to that question is. And it was in that meeting.
We just need to slightly reform it, right? It's just
we need to slightly we need to engage in tapering. Tapering per the Jerome Powell model is all that's really needed from the libertarian perspective. No, instead of that, she said that she didn't really believe in ending the Fed, that she hadn't done her research on the matter. That was a huge red flag. That was a couple weeks before she took the position of CEO, but unfortunately, that's not where it ended. Fast forward to April, I think April 20th, 2021. God, I don't know how I remember dates like that. That's crazy. I remember dates like that, but I can't remember like very pertinent, important information. But it's late April 2021.
Well, you're an archaeologist, so the dates are important, right? Like that's kind of wired into your
Yeah, actually, that's probably what it is. This was so this was several days at this point, before Lauren had actually taken the position of CEO. The YAL development team had coordinated with the Babylon Bee to get a sponsored article published. Mentioning some of the activism work of one of our activists at a very left-leaning college in upstate New York. Mm-hmm. The way that the text in this Babylon Bee article was written, it really seemed to read like some sort of like an endorsement of YAL, right? This was huge. Like the Young Americans for Liberty staff were excited to see the Babylon Bee actually mentioning one of our activists in upstate New York by name, to actually see, praise for our work. Because like the article concluded with a note is like to give to an organization committed to fighting cancel culture on college campuses, donate to Young Americans for Liberty. And there was a link to our donation page. So this looked huge, right? But this upset Lauren very, very much. So she contacted me, said that she felt like it was that this article from the Babylon Bee endorsing YAL was tone deaf because it made us look like, quote, a bunch of privileged white kids. And I thought, oh my God, this is what we have in store for us. I knew things were going to be bad with Lauren Doherty as soon as I see that she was interested in operating some sort of reality where we have to tiptoe around people thinking that we're a bunch of privileged white people. She then called the chief of staff after she sent me that strongly worded email, conveyed the same sentiment to him. I think she kind of chewed him out was really what I was gathering from all of that. So that was crazy, but it obviously didn't end there. It was right at a month later. So the social media team under my management posted the first of many tweets attacking Liz Cheney. This was early May. The first of many tweets attacking Liz Cheney. Okay, YAL was founded in opposition to the Bushes and the Cheneys. So attacking Liz Cheney, that should be a no-brainer, right? But Lauren Doherty apparently had a problem with that. with our attack on Twitter against Liz Cheney, and pinged me with a series of texts reading, and I quote, I've got this one right here. My brain isn't at its best this week, but isn't what Liz Cheney is doing right now more aligned with our interests than other times? I don't see how criticizing her right now on her opposition to Trumpism is in your best interest. I frankly commend her for her courage on this one. So there you have it. That was the CEO of Young Americans for Liberty praising Liz Cheney for being brave. And praising Liz Cheney for being brave for no other reason than the fact that she was against Trump.
Yeah, I remember the Libertarian Party LP National account making a similar tweet around that time. So I wonder like how coordinated this was, if they were, trying to have the same message at the same time. But yeah, man, Liz Cheney, geez, like if there's ever an easy target for someone you're never supposed to praise, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was absolutely just staggering to me. It upset my team, my staff quite a bit. But weirdly enough, every time there was some stupid directive or some stupid creative injunction passed down from Lauren to my team about something that we weren't doing right, and it was always stupid. I hate to just sound bitter, but she quite literally had nothing of value ever even once to contribute to my team's operations. Not even once. I wish that I could say maybe Lauren had this right and maybe Lauren had that right, but I'm sorry, Reed, she just didn't. A person who doesn't have enough of a bearing on the philosophy of liberty to understand why you got to end the Fed and why Liz Cheney is never worth praising is not a person who can possibly contribute any constructive feedback or direction at all. It didn't end there though. So it was like a month later, right at a month later, my social media team posted a picture of Kamala Harris laughing into a microphone with a caption reading something like, find someone who laughs at your jokes the way Kamala Harris laughs at a question she doesn't know the answer to, right? I thought that was a pretty benign thing. It's kind of funny. But Lauren got angry, sent me a series of text messages ordering me to take it down. She said, it looks really bad if we're calling the first female VP of color sexist or stupid, which is how many people are going to see this, right? And so my team fought her on this, but she refused to budge. And so that was just insane to me. So Kamala Harris can't be attacked by Young Americans for Liberty now because Kamala Harris is the first vice president who is a woman of color. That
sounds kind of sexist and racist to me, actually, if you're not allowed to criticize someone because they're a woman and they're of color. Isn't that implying that they're not able to stand up for themselves? I don't know. But
it's always these suburban pasty, white liberals like Lauren Doherty who are the most
available for outrage
stuff about this. So that was just crazy. But unfortunately, it didn't get any better. In fact, the longer that Lauren Doherty stayed after taking the position of CEO there in the spring of 2021, the more intense a lot of these injunctions got. So it was early December. You and your audience might remember the really epic Christmas card that Thomas Massey put out last year. It's him and his family. They're posing with their weapons in front of their Christmas tree or something like that, right? So the Yale staff thought this was awesome. They loved that Thomas Massey and his family, they got their M16s or AR-15s, everything else, right? They're posing in front of their Christmas tree. And this is a very good, strong, unapologetic way of promoting the Second Amendment. There's nothing to be ashamed of here, right? We should be doing more of that. Mm-hmm. But while the Yale staff thought this was awesome and they were sharing it and stuff like that, Lauren Doherty, in all of her profound and boundless wisdom, sent an all-staff email condemning that card, reminding us that many people find guns very scary. So this sent a ripple throughout the entirety of the Yale staff. This made a lot of people rightfully upset. The following day, I got on the phone with Lauren Doherty and I told her, look, Lauren, a lot of staffers are coming to me like, what the hell's going on? Are we going to become an anti-gun Oregon now? And I said, I'm letting you know this because you're actually upsetting quite a bit of staff and you're giving staffers, this impression and that impression. And she said to me over the phone that day, I think this was Jesus, I think this was like Tuesday, December 7th. I think I remember that date just because it was December 7th, right? Mm-hmm. But she said to me, if there's anybody in this office who still questions my libertarian credentials, I need to know who they are, and they need to find another line of employment. I pulled the phone away from my face like, oh my God, like this is what Yao has on its hands. You know, yeah. Somebody who's going to say just absolutely stupid, outrageous things that directly contradict the company's values and then blame the people themselves for getting upset. Like this is the worst kind of leader, in my opinion. Yeah. Is a leader who's absolutely pathetic at leading on every single level, and then has the audacity to blame the people who they're supposed to be inspiring for not being inspired by their lack of leadership. Mm-hmm. But that's what we had on our hands. This was, but the whole month of December was just a nightmare dealing with this lady. It was a couple days after that. My team put up a meme. It was an image of a bunch of kids. It looked like they were in preschool. They were all wearing masks. And the caption at the top said, "The desire to mask children is evil." Well, to no one's surprise, this upset Lauren Doherty. Mm-hmm. So she contacted me and said that we needed to take that down because the desire to mask children is not evil. I have a screenshot with a text message of Lauren Doherty that Lauren Doherty sent me saying the desire to mask children is not evil. Mm-hmm. Yeah. She even likened it to the Nazis by saying the Nazis were evil. Masking children is not evil. So that was just insane. So she made my team take it down, to no surprise. I got on the phone with her and I said, I tried to push back with her. I said, look, Lauren, my team is going to start asking questions if we have to take down this post, right? You got to understand that. And she said, Reed, she said to me, I kid you not, she said to me over the phone, Reed, I mask my children. Does that make me evil? Once again, I just pulled the phone from my face and just looked at it like, oh my God, like what kind of person am I talking to? Like a person who brags about masking their kids and then tries to take, that and inject that into the brand of a company, a brand which has existed for over a decade before they had ever, come there. So that was just crazy. Like this lady's bragging to me. I wish I had that in writing, but I don't. She said it to me over the phone. But she said, I mask my children. Reed, does that make me evil? And like I was this close to telling her yes. And then it's like putting in my resignation. Yeah.
This is December of 2021, not March of 2020. It's like we know that this doesn't do anything, and we know this is just ridiculous at this point. And
Yeah, dude, it was insane. Like I was waiting on Rod Serling to pop out of a door or wall somewhere and to look into some unseen audience and somewhere and say, Reed doesn't realize this. He just stepped into the Twilight Zone. I didn't think that I was in reality. Like I said, the whole month of December was an absolute disaster dealing with Lauren. It was Christmas Eve. She got angry with something else that we posted. We called Joe Biden a liar. On Christmas Eve, my social media team, they put up a meme of Joe Biden calling, it had Joe Biden like on a grill, and the meme said, you got an elf on a shelf, we've got a liar on a fryer. Okay, we thought that was kind of cute, whatever else, right? But Lauren Doherty contacted me, made my team take it down because in her words, Gal didn't need to be calling politicians liars. I'm like, okay, like if you can't call politicians liars and you're a libertarian student org, like what can you do? Like that goes beyond fundamental. That is pre-fundamental, right? I don't understand how to properly explain that if you can't call a politician a liar, if you can't point out when they're being dishonest, you can't do anything else substantive in the world of politics in any sort of way. You just can't.
Right.
So that was crazy. And then there was this instance that happened. This was the day after Christmas. My team posted an old patriotic picture of 3 revolutionary soldiers marching with musical instruments in their hands. And the caption read, if I remember correctly, it was like, the way things are looking, we might have to get the band back together, right? This is like good, hardcore, like 1776, fuck yeah content, right? And lo and behold, Lauren Doherty contacts me and says that we have to take that picture down because it might incite political violence. That an image of the American Revolution, of revolutionary soldiers marching against redcoats because they're fighting tyranny, might incite political violence. That is the kind of just groundbreaking idiocy that Young Americans for Liberty still has in charge, and that the board of directors at Yale actually put into the position of CEO. Someone who thinks that Liz Cheney is worth praising, that Kamala Harris should be off limits, that we shouldn't celebrate guns because guns are scary, that masking children isn't evil, that it's too risky to call politicians liars, and that the imagery of the American Revolution is akin to inciting political violence. That's what's in charge of Students for Ron Paul.
Is she a fan of Nina Yankovic's new position, the board of disinformation? Do you think she's probably a fan of all this at this point, or?
If I can speculate on a purely opinion basis, I would say she probably is. I would say I would not be surprised if she were. I don't know that, obviously, but I wouldn't necessarily be surprised. And I feel confident enough, saying something like that, because on top of everything that I just shared with you and your audience, it was pretty obvious to a lot of the Yale staff who were paying attention to what Lauren Doherty was putting on social media, that she clearly had some sympathies towards the Liz Cheney, Lindsey Graham, Mitt Romney, Bill Weld, Bill Kristol, sect, we might say. So it's like, I'll never forget. This was, I forget which month this was, but this was in the summer of 2021. There were some staffers who had approached me and said that they were kind of worried about the stuff that Lauren was sharing, because Lauren was retweeting AOC. I kid you not, she was retweeting AOC, but she wasn't retweeting like Thomas Massey and like obvious champions within our movement. So I got on the phone with her and I said, "Hey, Lauren, you got a couple staffers who are a little bit worried, about the fact that you've retweeted AOC. They've already seen it. Why don't we fix that by having you retweet Ron Paul? Maybe because you are CEO of Students for Ron Paul, if you were to retweet Ron Paul every day or every other day, that would help your public image," which is pretty much a carte blanche at that point. It was. Nobody really knew who Lauren Doherty was. She had been obscure until she came to Yale. Maybe that would give more people the impression that she was, as ideologically aligned as she should be. And she said to me over the phone, she said, "Oh, I would retweet Ron Paul's Twitter page, but all he does is post the Ron Paul Liberty Report, and it's just so boring." And I thought, what? Oh my gosh. So she'll go out of her way to justify retweeting somebody like AOC, right? Or one of the writers at the Bulwark, for example, which she was known to do. Or she would retweet Mitt Romney's statement on the withdrawal from Afghanistan. Or something like that, but she wouldn't retweet the Ron Paul Liberty Report. So that's why I say whenever you talk about potential sympathy to some element of the deep state or some new regulatory agency, I don't know that very much would surprise me, Reed. Like I said, that's purely my opinion, but that's where I stand based on all the observations that I have and all of the nonsense that I put up with for as long as I did.
Yeah, I mean, this is the real danger of the woke stuff. It's annoying, the woke stuff, but what's a lot scarier than the annoying, ridiculousness of it is what it usually ends up being a mask for. Because when it's a mask for Liz Cheney, Mitt Romney, Bill Kristol, I've seen this. It's a trap, not just for libertarians, for progressives who are supposed to be good on a couple things like war and civil liberties or whatever. Like I saw Marianne Williamson agreeing with Bill Kristol about pulling out of Afghanistan because we needed to stay there to protect women's rights. Like, this is what they use it for. And, people just fall into that trap and they don't realize that that's what's really going on. Like, you're still supporting George W. Bush. It might not be the PNAC approach or the conservative evangelical Christian approach, but it's the same thing. They're doing the same policies. They're just using a new veneer to disguise it, and that's what's really so dangerous about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe something I should have gotten to much earlier in the show is the fact that it was just a few hours after the board of directors had terminated me for having the audacity to call Lauren Doherty out. They hired a guy named Brendan Steinhauser to come in, serve as the newest addition of the executive team. I had never met this person before. He didn't work with Young Americans for Liberty previously, but he did serve as Dan Crenshaw's campaign manager. This was also a person who was against the withdrawal from Afghanistan back in August. You can see that on his Twitter page. I think his handle's like @bstein80. As early as December of last year, he was putting out tweets in favor of military action against Russia over the Ukraine crisis. And it was just last week that he was getting attacked by our great friend Pete Quinones, right? On Twitter, because this guy, the new chief strategy officer at Young Americans for Liberty, who Lauren Doherty, I guess, hired to replace me, actually put out a tweet hinting at the idea that Tucker Carlson is a Russian agent. So, yeah, I kid you not. That's the newest addition to Yao's executive team. The person who, to my understanding, is now in charge of the communications department that I and a lot of other great Ron Paulers actually built. So you're right. I mean, I think that the reason, one of the major reasons why I turned down Yao's money in the first place was because what's happened to Yao contains so many different profound lessons that we need to carry with us to the rest of the movement. And what you just said a minute ago about how wokeism is typically just a mask to conceal a lot of other hideous policies like neoconservatism, like what is being introduced to Yao. What's happening to Yao is just a perfect reflection of all this. I mean, like you can't really ask for a much better case study, a much better example than what's unfortunately happening to that organization. So on that note, I mean, whenever it comes to the lessons that need to be learned here, maybe the most profound is that no matter how well-intended an organization is, no matter what kind of people you have who have helped build it whenever it's built, and organizations are going to go astray. I mean, Young Americans for Liberty was originally founded as students for Ron Paul. And so many of the people who were involved in the 2008 and 2012 Ron Paul campaigns, or if they weren't directly involved with the founding of Young Americans for Liberty, they weren't very far. They were tangential to it. And now Young Americans for Liberty has completely lost its way. It has a horrible board of directors that don't share any of the sympathies. Even Jeff Raisey, the founder of the company, who has been widely celebrated for being one of the OG Ron Paulers. He's completely, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I can tell, just seems to be completely and totally apathetic to what's going on there. Completely checked out of libertarian politics, and the Ron Paul revolution inside that organization is dead, right? And it could not have been founded with better intentions way back in 2008. So, institutions, organizations, political parties, these are just temporary vehicles, through which we keep the movement itself going. They're not synonymous with the movement or the philosophy itself. They're just very temporary vehicles whereby we do that. I think that's one thing we have to understand is that, the fight for liberty is much more eternal and much more far-reaching than any one organization. So, like a couple of folks, I mean, I'm not joking. A couple of folks contacted me right after things blew up, and their concerns were, "Hey, is libertarianism dead? Is the liberty movement dead? Is the Ron Paul revolution gone?" They would have their own version of asking that question, essentially. To which I said, "Hell no, it's not dead. We have to keep fighting here. Now we should be galvanized and energized and ready to grind our teeth together and do whatever fighting is necessary. Because if we throw in the towel and we say that libertarianism is dead, then the people who took over Young Americans for Liberty, who want to see libertarianism carried away from the message of Ron Paul, they're going to win. They consider that to be a victory for themselves. So just, the fight for liberty, the libertarian movement, it's much greater and much more far-reaching than one single organization, one single institution, and I think that'll be a general rule of thumb for all time.
Yeah. So, just be explicit. What do you think about Young Americans for Liberty, and should people still give money to it, or should they just let it die? Do you think there's no way that it can be reformed at this point? What are your thoughts there?
I don't think that the problems at Young Americans for Liberty are a problem that they can fire their way out of. As I alluded to a minute ago, the issues happening there, that they're not exclusive to Lauren Doherty. Lauren Doherty has not been fired because she is doing exactly what the board of directors wants her to do. She is a reflection of what the board of directors, really the highest up and least accountable institution in any organization. She's doing exactly what they want. It's virtually impossible to get rid of one director, much less an entire board, plus your CEO, plus, as badly as I hate to say it, the majority of the executive team, the vice presidents, at the company. I see Young Americans for Liberty staying around as an organization for a long time, in all likelihood, but I don't see it being anything close to a reflection of what it was intended to be. And any attempts that we have seen over the last few months, or that we will continue to see, to celebrate the Ron Paul revolution, I think they should be treated with extreme skepticism, and in all likelihood as nothing more than the organization trying to save face for having betrayed Dr. Paul and everything that he stood for. So this isn't a problem they can fire their way out of. The board of directors is completely, in my opinion, corrupt. They've lost message. They're out of touch. The board of directors is occupied by enemies of the Ron Paul revolution. The CEO, my God, we've spent the last 30 minutes talking about the CEO, but the rest of the executive team, they don't, the entire, all three tiers of leadership are just completely far gone. They're completely far gone. I don't see that as a situation that an organization can survive. There's so much influence inside the organization that is not of a Ron Paul nature that I think that, if there is any Ron Paul influence left in that org, it will not be the true Northern Star that it was intended to be. It will be nothing but a faction inside of the organization. It will be one of several choices as far as what philosophy the organization can adopt. And that is appalling. Anything less than the Ron Paul revolution inside that organization is completely and totally appalling. And in my opinion, and I'm afraid this has happened, but if the organization is treating the Ron Paul revolution as sort of an inconvenient faction that it only wants to pay lip service to whenever it's time for some new fundraising gimmick or it's time to save face for a PR crisis, and that's an organization that doesn't need to be around. If it's nothing more than a gimmick to them, right?
Yeah.
So I just don't see it being a situation that is where we can get the outcome that we want. And even if you could replace the entire board of directors, get rid of the bad people on the executive team, spend the legwork that it takes to get the rest of the anti-Ron Paul influence out, you then have to undergo the fatigues of keeping it out, which is impossible. And I think that amount of time is better invested in some other kind of organization or some other kind of movement, or carrying the Ron Paul revolution. You're carrying that torch somewhere else. I really hate to have to share that with the Liberty movement. It has not been pleasant going on show after show after show over the last 2 months now, telling people that Young Americans for Liberty is dead. That has not been pleasant. I did not wish for that at all, but I don't have a very optimistic outlook there. And I'm also hearing almost every day, even now, months after everything blew up, I'm still hearing every single day from people. If they're not inside the org, then they're outside of it. They're close to it and they understand what's happening on the inside. They're telling me all these different things about how the programs are failing, about how the door knocking program is becoming dysfunctional, that they're not getting personnel, that they're not getting this, that they're not getting that. I'm hearing this stuff every single day. So I just don't see. I don't see, a very positive outlook for that organization, but I choose not to get upset, by that, because I do think that if we roll up our sleeves and we all do our jobs elsewhere, then the Ron Paul revolution's best days can still be ahead.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing all this with us, man. And yeah, I think it's like you said, it's about learning lessons going forward. So where can people keep up with you, and what is next for Reed Cooley now that Young Americans for Liberty is gone? Are you trying to start anything new, or are you just waiting to see what comes on the horizon? Where can we follow you, and what's coming next?
Sure. So the best place to find me is just on Twitter. I'm not incredibly active on very many other platforms, at least not these days. My handle is @JReedCooley, JREEDCOOLEY. As far as what's next for me, Reed, I've got my hands on a lot of different cookie jars as far as keeping this movement going. I'm extremely excited over some stuff that's going to be launching publicly over the next couple of months. So I would just encourage your audiences to stay tuned over that. I'm working on trying to advance the Ron Paul revolution in a much more decentralized way that I'm accustomed to, and I have to say that's a pretty refreshing way of looking at it.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, man, for joining the show. Maybe we'll get you back on again sometime. This whole read and read chemistry that we got going here, I don't think it's really unparalleled, because there is no other Read C and Read C in the Liberty movement. And yeah, if anyone's new to the channel, please subscribe. I will be going live with Josh Smith on Tuesday night. And then the guys from the Biting the Bullet podcast will be on Thursday night. And then, as always, they'll be on Tower Gang on Wednesday night. So thanks for watching, guys.